combatants in an ongoing incident unfolded recently in the occupied West Bank. A violent incident unfolded recently in the occupied West Bank, which has seen an onslaught of violence and land grabs by extremist settlers enabled by the IDF as well as IDF raids. 2 Palestinians rammed into Israeli border police. Those police then fired on the assailants, and in the chaos, a stray bullet fired by the Israelis killed a 3-year-old Bedouin Palestinian child. Take a listen, though, to how Sky News described these events.
This happened at the border checkpoint. You can see a car going through and ramming some of the police that were actually manning that checkpoint. The video we're going to freeze shortly, but the 2 people, a man and a woman in the car. Subsequently, they were killed by the police, but it looks like accidentally a stray bullet found its way into the van ahead, and that killed a 3 or 4-year-old young lady. So tragic events in the West Bank.
That's right. A 3-year-old was described as a, quote, young lady. The bullet, of course, just magically found its way into the vehicle. Now, contrast this language to a recent report in the Daily Mail decrying the continued captivity of 4 Israeli women still being held by Hamas. Their headline reads, "The faces of the girls still being held by Hamas as their families make a desperate plea for their release 3 months after they were captured." The article features deeply emotional interviews with the families of these women who I am sure are absolutely tormented. But these are not, in fact, girls. They are adult women, old enough to serve in the IDF, which all 4 of them do. A fact that was conveniently left out of that entire Daily Mail piece. So you're left with the specter of a literal toddler being called a young lady, while adult women soldiers are called girls. And while these soldiers, combatants in an ongoing war, are portrayed in the fullness of their humanity with their hopes, their wishes, the terror of their families all showcased, we will never know anything more than the most basic of details about the 3-year-old. What was her favorite toy? Does she have a big brother who misses her? Will her parents ever be able to get over the loss of their darling girl? Now, you might think I'm cherry picking here, one-off incidents of shoddy and one-sided journalism, but a growing mountain of evidence shows that the dehumanization of Palestinians and egregiously lopsided coverage is systematic and it is widespread. In fact, according to a new analysis, the unprecedented toll that Israel's assault on Gaza has taken on children has been rendered nearly invisible, featured in just 2 headlines out of 1,100 that were examined by The Intercept. But that is far from all. Wild imbalances are happening at CNN, where we now know they willingly operate under the IDF censorship regime, but also at prestige papers like The Washington Post, which positions itself as a beacon of journalistic courage and integrity, at right-wing outlets like Fox News, and also at liberal ones like MSNBC. Right here in the US, that imbalance is manifest, but also in Britain at the BBC. Even for someone as jaded and skeptical of mainstream coverage as I certainly am, the insanely imbalanced nature of these numbers is still shocking. So let's start with the new report. This was published in The Intercept, compiled by Adam Johnson and Othman Ali. They took a look at coverage in 3 ostensibly liberal outlets: The Times, The Washington Post, and the LA Times over a 6-week period from October 7th through November 24th. And they compiled a number of metrics seeking to show the consistent way that Israeli lives are valued to a dramatically greater degree than Palestinian lives. Just take a look at this chart. So they calculated that the word slaughter was used to describe the killing of Israelis on October 7th 60 times. Yet when it came to Palestinians, many thousands more of whom have been killed, only a single time was their mass killing described as it should be, as a slaughter. It's a similar story with the word horrific. Hamas's actions were described as horrific 38 times. That's appropriate. Israeli assaults on innocent civilians were only described as horrific 4 times in 6 weeks. October 7th was labeled a massacre a full 120 times during the relevant period, but as Palestinians were being killed by the tens of thousands, these deaths were only described as a massacre 4 times. Now, keep in mind, according to Euromed Monitor, 28,201 Palestinian civilians have been killed by Israel since October 7th. An estimated 695 civilians were killed in the Hamas attack on October 7th. In other words, 40 times more Palestinians have been killed than Israelis. But if you were to judge the relative loss of life by the number of mentions in media outlets, you would have to presume far more dead Israelis than Palestinians by a long stretch. According to Adam and Ali's analysis, for every 2 Palestinian deaths, Palestinians are mentioned once. For every Israeli death, Israelis are mentioned 8 times, or a rate 16 times more per death than that of Palestinians. And you can see this from this chart. As more Palestinians were killed, they were actually mentioned less and less. We witnessed this in real time, how invented university anti-Semitism scandals and whatever the hell is going on with Bill Ackman, how that took the place of coverage of the increasingly undeniable horrors that Palestinians are being subjected to. This chart tracks how as the horror increased, the coverage actually decreased. Also revealed in this report, real and invented anti-Semitism was covered far more vigorously than Islamophobia. This in spite of the fact that multiple violent incidents during this time appeared spurred by anti-Muslim or anti-Arab hate. 87% of mentions of discrimination concerned anti-Semitism, only 13% concerned Islamophobia. A violent incident unfolded recently in the occupied West Bank, which has seen an